Hey all, so it's been a while since I made a hot rod video, so I figure might as well. You get cool cans online, entire kits for about 300 bucks. I'm going to see how cheaply I can make a cool can myself. So here's some of the materials. I have $6 in this little polypropylene can here. I have a clear one that I'm actually going to use. I'm going to insulate this with some leftover insulation that I have, closed cell insulation. Just a little bit of strapping here, 2 lock nuts, 2 eye hooks here. I made a little template where this is going to go, so it's up along the angle here that I need. Some of these tube nuts, because we're going to be running this from the mechanical fuel pump. This is what I call my die. This is just a 4-inch piece of PVC. PVC is just a template where I'm going to make my coil in the bucket. And yeah, we'll walk through it, see how it goes. I think I could do a cool can for less than, I'm going to say less than 50 bucks. So this is just a little bit of closed cell insulation here. I had left over from doing my heat exchanger downstairs, 1/4 inch. So this is going to go around the entire bucket. I'm going to just trace out the top and bottom on this and then measure out the length that I need to wrap around. Then I'm going to put another reflective layer. You want to be careful if you're using plastic. Polypropylene, starts getting bendy and meltable at about 200 degrees, 180, 200 degrees. It is pretty thick, but you do want to insulate it if you're going to be using plastic. The other option would be using like a double-walled wine carafe, which is going to be a little bit thinner, but you can still make a decent, I think, cooler with a wine carafe. You just have to make your template that you're going to be doing your spiral to be a little bit tighter, because I don't think 4 inches will work for that. But yeah, so let's get that done. Another important note when you're actually measuring the circumference of your container here. So it's a little bit wider at the top than it is at the bottom here. And I have to go up over this lip. So you can see it's about 19.5 inches right here. I'm just going to add a 1/2 inch and then just trim as necessary. And then there's going to be insulation on the bottom and on the top. So this is going to be the most complicated part of the build here, because you're going to have to measure from your, well, if you have a mechanical fuel pump, this is a 340 motor, you're going to have to take one of these bad boys, or you take a coat hanger too, that works, and figure out what length you need to route it where you need to route it. So my coal can is going to be sitting here. I'm going to have to install the bracket that I made right here, set the can down in there, figure out the geometry of where I want to bring the fuel up. So you want to generally avoid running the fuel line next to anything. Like right now it's run right to the block right here. Down here you can see this line. So I think I'm going to want to come up out here away from the block as much as I can, come out through here, in and out through the can, and then I got to think about over this alternator, because you don't want that line to sweat and you don't want water getting on your alternator, or you don't want drips of condensation getting on your alternator. If you can help it, you could also insulate the line. I have the line coming up here, you can see. So I'm going to have to figure out how we want to actually route this. It'd be nice to actually come up, route it behind here, and then bring it back underneath somewhere right here and go into our fuel here. Generally, you want to minimize the amount of rubber tubing you have. So I'm going to try to do this all in one piece with the 12-foot copper nickel line that I got. Alright, so I've taken my bracket that I made and marked here and here. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, there and there for where my bracket needs to be. What I'm doing here, I'm going to hit this top hole here, drill it out, and then seat my bracket and just make sure that my second mark down here is right. The clearance is pretty tight in here for what I'm doing, plus the insulation that I'm going to have, so I really need to get this right, and you're going to have to measure as many times as you're comfortable. So all you Mopar fans out there, forgive me for drilling into this CUDA, but it's a hot rod, so it's got to be done. So this is my first locator hole drilled out there. After you drill this out to the size that you need. In my case, it's 1/4 inch. You're going to want to take a little bit of spray paint on a Q-tip, hit that Q-tip, and then go around it. Preferably, you want a zinc layer first. Let me see if I have any. So like this self-etching primer, just on the edges so it doesn't rust, and then go around with whatever spray paint you want of choice, just to hit what metal is exposed right there. Alright, so as you can see, I had the pilot hole there. I drilled it out a little bit more. Another thing to note, I already checked, but make sure whatever you're drilling, that there's nothing on the other side and that you have the clearances that you need. That's always important. I should have probably specified that before showing you that first pilot hole that I drilled. So I just want to clean this up here. This is another size up. I have to go one more size, and then it'll be the right hole for the bracket, and we'll test fit the bracket. So you can start seeing the idea coming together here. You see my first bolt there. I'm going to have a second one. It's an eye bolt. My can, once it's insulated, is going to go in here, and these 2 eye bolts are going to serve as a way to wrap this can to where it needs to be, where it'll stay in place. You have to be really careful with the measurements because you can see minimal space that I have around here, but this is about where it's going to be. So I want to mount this first before I start messing with the fuel lines. This bolt here can actually be threaded deeper in here, and then it'll actually shift the can back a little bit to give optimal space. But this looks good for where I have it. Also, if this doesn't work out with the polypropylene and the insulation, this setup will still work for switching out to a different can size. And I could lower and raise the bolt too if I needed to, or make whatever strapping that I need to make it fit. So this is my I designed it to my worst case. So this is my worst case, fattest, most space hogging cylinder I found. But this will also work if you have a thinner cylinder. You could modify the design to make it work for you if you need to. So another quick point that I wanted to make. So you can see this eye bolt's angled. If you have a vise, you could actually bend the top of this down if you actually need to. I'm not going to need to. I'm going to set it deeper, and I'm just going to put it vertical, because then I'm going to put a strapping through there to actually hold that container. It's also interesting to note, so as careful as I was in measuring as many times as I measured, you could still see, if you look down at that bottom there, how far I was off and where I need to adjust to get that second bolt through there to keep this stable and where I need it to be. So go slow, especially if you're drilling into a muscle car, any muscle car, and you know, it should work out fine if you think through it logically. Just some tips. So a little bit of a design change here as I was thinking through this. So originally I wanted to make a one-piece solid copper nickel line coming from the mechanical fuel pump, going up through my can cooler, down into a coil, back out and over to the fuel filter. However, thinking through this motor doesn't stay in one location when you press on the gas. It twists and you have vibrations, and having a solid line straight into this, I don't think is going to work. I think the motor tilting and whatnot is going to cause a problem if it was one solid line. So I think I'm going to adjust here. Instead of making it one solid line, I'm going to go down to the mechanical fuel pump where it's, you know, attached to the block here, and I'm going to make a piece of hosing, or a piece of copper nickel line that comes out, up, and right through here before it goes into the cool can, and I'll connect that with a piece of fuel hose like I have down here, simply because I think the fuel hose has a little bit more flex to it, and I think it'll absorb the twisting of the motor when I hit the accelerator, and then I don't have to worry about stressing that line or this cool can being pulled back when it's going to be held in place with metal strapping from this eye bolt, and then there's going to be another eye bolt down here. I think that'll work out better thinking through it. Okay, another thought as I was thinking through here, so my fuel lines are going to be coming up and into this container here. I'm a little worried about this eye bolt interfering. I wanted to run the fuel line originally up through here, drill 2 holes through the metal right at the lip here, or just under the lip. I may have to adjust this eye bolt and actually put it in my vise and hammer it to the point where this shifts down a little bit, maybe about a ½ inch or so down here. So guys, here's another tip. When you're measuring out the lines for where you want the fuel lines to go, I have a clothespin hooked onto the flexible measuring tape, and I'm just going through here, figuring out where I want to route it and how much I need to come right up here where I'm going to be connecting the plastic hose to the coil that I'm going to make for the inside here. So you do want to have your placement of where your cooler can is going to be before you start messing with the lines and what you're going to do with the lines. You can see the kind of the concept here. I also made a gasket for the back, the back of this, just because I don't want to scratch the paint. It's already bad enough that I had to drill 2 holes. So these are going to have strapping that go around this. I'm going to have to pull this top eyelet down a little bit because I plan on having my fuel lines come up in and out through the top here. And then my outlet line is probably going to come back out across here, down underneath the alternator here, and up and around because I don't want to get any type of condensation on this alternator. So that's going to be a little bit of a snaky challenge there. Alright, so we got the can insulated right here. We still got to insulate the top. I'm actually going to double insulate it and then put some foil tape around it as well. We have the lines run back here. Got to put a clamp on that. This is a whole line going in what's going to be going to the fuel filter right here. Problem that I'm running into, and what I suggested earlier in the video, probably won't work with the eyelet hooks right here being backed up. The insulation made it a little bit fatter, and I have this resting up against the alternator here. There's just a little bit of room, but when that engine flexes, I don't want that alternator coming down into the can here. So I think what I'm going to do, right now I just have it zip tied. I'm going to cut off that zip tie that's right to this eye hook here, get some 1/4 inch flat bolts so I can move this over about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. It'll give me more clearance here and away from this hose. See if I could get that explained a little bit better. So this will be coming back. I could push this over just slightly, and it'll keep the clearance of the bucket away from the alternator and this overflow hose right here. And maybe I can manipulate this a little bit because I don't like it sitting up against this can, even though it's just insulation. And what I'm going to do is put this strapping around it instead of zip ties. Have the strapping go through, tighten it down for the bolts, so this strapping will hold this container over. We'll see how it works. So I did take the eye bolts out, and that did give me more clearance, as you can see from the alternator here. The problem I had was now this was wiggling back and forth, so I came up with this redneck masterpiece. As you can see, I played Lego zip ties here, and put an eye bolt through here to stabilize this strap here, and then put a little zip tie here. And for those of you who are going to criticize me, look, I added a washer to make it look professional. So yeah, this is my little setup here to stabilize the can until I come up with a better binding solution. But it looks like it's stable in that direction, relatively stable in that direction, but there's a little bit of play right here. Nothing when this car's bouncing back and forth to really be too concerned about, I think, so far. And I have an automatic, or well, I guess is a manual tightening strap here if I want to tighten it down more. But I'm just more concerned about it staying in place for right now and testing it out and then coming up with a more permanent solution. But my wife always says, why do you save stuff? Well, I save these bolts here, I save this insulation here. It always has potential. So a lot of this stuff is reused. So this is kind of new old tubing. It's tubing that I just saved around. It actually is fuel tubing. You want to minimize this on your design though. So this inlet coming in here is a separate piece, and that's just in case there's any movement in the engine. This rubber piece will take it more than flexing the steel line. Or sorry, not a steel line, this is a copper nickel line. Still, you don't want to stress metal back and forth. You'll get work hardening, then it'll become brittle, it'll potentially snap after some time. So that's the reason for this plastic inlet here, and the reason I didn't make, as I said earlier in the video, didn't make it one solid piece. I will say, in hindsight being 2020, the coil inside of this that I made is still connected to this one piece here. I think in the future, when I redesign this with 3/8 instead of 5/16 tubing, I'm actually going to make a separate coil, and then I'm going to have a rubber hose in and out, because this was an absolute pain trying to make this look pretty. Not that it has to look pretty, but getting this down in there and getting the holes drilled and this coming out through here. So that's a future project, but for right now, pretty steady overall. So I think we're gonna take it for a test drive and see how it runs. So almost at the final configuration here. I have the lines hooked up to a new fuel filter right here, and line coming down. Again, you want to minimize the number or the amount of rubber tubing you have on here, because rubber eventually breaks down. Actually breaks down pretty quick. So we are at the final configuration here of the coolcan, and the top I only single insulated. Don't really have to double insulate that from what I saw so far. I want to add a logo to the top at some point, but just so you can see down inside what this looks like. So I have 7 coils going down and through here. It was a pain getting this all fit through here. I actually didn't notch the top. I actually drilled through it. That was really a pain. So next time I'm going to make the coil separate and have an inlet and an outlet. But this coil is all one piece that goes down. It's insulated now with this wrap here. Goes down around behind the alternator and then up into the fuel pump or the fuel filter right here. Again, that's minimizing as much of this rubber tubing as you possibly can. You always want to keep an eye on that. And as you can see, I have some ice and water in here. You don't want to fill this bucket all the way up, because you don't want, as you're accelerating this, to come back and wash down through here. Not that you're gonna, not that you'll necessarily splash on your alternator, but just be conscious having water here. So far that I found the test drives that I've taken it out on, it's worked phenomenally well in actually cooling this. You'll actually see a lot of condensation building up here, and you can feel after a run that this physically this fuel filter is cooled off, and there is a hot line, coolant line coming up right here. So you want to think about maybe insulating this, or I want to think about insulating this in the future. You want to think about where your heat sources are and how to position them. So far it's actually worked out really nicely for me. I haven't had any fuel percolation issues anymore, so that's kind of nice, even at running the car at 200 degrees. And I also tested this with shutting the car off when it was as hot as I could get it on an 80-degree day, 200 degrees or so, 210 degrees, shutting it down, have the hood closed, and then doing a heat soak test to see if I could actually get it to start up right away, which after 15 minutes it did start up right away. And I was monitoring these lines. I should probably pull some data from the inlet and outlet just to see where I'm running. This line is actually noticeably cooler than the incoming line here, and worked fine. So after my heat soak test, it started up right away, and this ice actually seems to last for quite some time. So this ice has actually been in here for the better part of the last 2.5 hours, and I did take it for another test drive before, and so far it's working pretty good. So yeah, that's how you make a coolcan with all your hoarded supplies that you never throw away, like myself, and you can tell your wife you told you so. So one other thing you want to think about, I wanted to talk about this before ending the video. The design of your coil, you want to make the inlet line go down to the bottom of your bucket and the outlet line to come up off the top. And the reason being is because your water can stratify when you have cold water. So your denser water is going to sink down until about 39 degrees. Once you get about 39 degrees Fahrenheit, a little bit less than that, ice doesn't necessarily form there. It forms at 32 obviously, but then your density, because of properties of water and also why ice floats, becomes less dense after that. But in general, just for the design of your coolcan, what I would recommend is having your inlet at that bottom so it's exposed to the coolest water as it's going through. Just a design consideration. My recommendation would be to have that inlet line come down to the bottom, have as much contact with that cooler water as you possibly can, and then up and out